When I was a kid, about 2 years ago, okay, maybe closer to 10, if you'll believe it, I had come home from church and I was flipping through whatever Bible my parents kept sitting on our living room bookshelf. I don't remember what I was looking for, and I don't really remember what had happened that prompted me to come home and furiously flip pages. But I do remember what happened when my dad saw me. He picked the Bible out of my hands, he closed his eyes, and without peeking, found a place, opened it, and put his finger anywhere on the page. He then opened his eyes, handed me the book, and said, "Read it to me." And I looked at him. He said, "Go on, you can read." It was a psalm. And I wish I could tell you which psalm it was, but I don't remember. I wish I could tell you that it was Psalm 30, because what a great story that would be. But I do remember what my dad said after I read it. He said, "Yep, that's it. That's the answer I've been looking for. I was worried about something, and that was just the answer I needed." If you ever need an answer, or if you get worried, close your eyes, open your Bible to the most middle you can find, Psalm 78. Close your eyes, ask your question in your head, and find a place on the page. Your answer will be right there. And I don't think I took him seriously for a very long time. After all, this was the same man who pulled coins out of my ear, could remove and reattach his thumb in the same motion, and always knew exactly which card was mine. For all intents and purposes, I was convinced my dad was magic. To be honest, I still kind of think he is. It wouldn't be too many years after that when I felt like I was being tugged, kicking and screaming, into the direction of the ministry. And don't you worry, I did my very best to ask my magic 8-ball Bible what the answers to all of that doubt was. And don't you worry, with the exception of one faulty flip that landed me on Job 40:15, which, for the record, says, "Take a look at the hippos, which I made just like you." With the exception of that one faulty flip, I'm here to tell you that my dad's little trick is pretty reliable. The Psalms. Oh, great book of laments, prayers, song, and celebration. Psalms, my psalms, a place to turn and blindly place my finger and find the words that I do not have. Oh, my beautiful Psalms. Until this year, I was asked to work with it in Hebrew. Don't do that. Psalm 30 is a particularly fascinating piece of literature to me. It is categorized handily in our Bible as thanksgiving for recovery from grave illness, and also noted that it's used in celebrations and festivals and feasts. It is our lectionary text for this week. It is a text used near Easter to encourage us to dance despite the darkness and to remember the dawn and the chill of the night. The psalmist here is pretty serious about their praises, so much so that the language shifts from "you did this for me, God, you drew me out, me," to a call to worship. Hey, look what God did for me. I bet God has done this for you. Let's shout about it. Let's sing about it. Let's praise. Have you ever seen a 4-year-old spin around in circles? At our wedding a few weeks ago, my niece found herself spinning in circles on the dance floor, and she said, "Auntie Heather, this makes me dizzy, and it's so fun. Dizzy is fun." The cries of a 4-year-old for me to join in dizzying circles doesn't sound fun. It sounds sickening. But it also sounds a little bit like a psalmist who just wants to share some joy. Look and listen to what God has done for me. Look how God has won for me, spinning and spinning. Look what God has done for you too. Wait, hasn't God won for you too? Don't you have anything to celebrate? When I first began working with this text in April, one of my closest friends was going through a personal crisis. You see, his oldest sister had just died unexpectedly from a drug overdose. Particularly jarring for him and for me as I listened to him was that he had been praying and reading and studying and being a good Christian, and really felt that this was Summer's turning point. This was the time when she was going to come to God and figure it all out and go dancing. He was convinced that she was healing until he got his phone call. I thought of this psalm and verse 5. Weeping may linger for the night, but joy comes with the morning. And I wanted to tell him this as I sat on the phone listening to him weep for his sister. I wanted to tell him that, yeah, buddy, this is awful, but joy is coming. Except he didn't have anything to celebrate, and he didn't want to celebrate. So how could the words of celebration and words of mourning both find themselves in the same psalm, let alone within a verse of one another? So I kept quiet, and I listened to him cry. There didn't seem to be any celebration that night. It is a very human thing for us to want to look at one another in times of crises and tell our friends and family members and communities that it's going to get better. It is a very human thing for us to jump into action on behalf of someone else when we see suffering. We want to be superheroes and help the grief disappear. We spring into action and we deliver cards, casseroles, and start carpools. We say prayers and drape ribbons over signs and doors. We vow to work harder on our gun laws. We stand together and light candles and sing a beautiful hymn, and we proclaim that love will win eventually, and that joy will come in the morning eventually. We try and push forward, push through, and survive. As we push forward in survival mode, I think that perhaps we lose sight of the preciousness of grief and loss. We've been taught to gather ourselves together and put on a face to get on with our lives and show up on Monday morning. Somewhere along the line of history, we have decided that everyone's night has to be a private affair, and that everyone's night should last the same amount of time. This vulnerability of night is often where the most precious parts of life happen. Though I think it a grave mistake to forget that not everyone's night is 8 hours long, and not everyone's morning comes rushing in. We zero in so quickly on being problem solvers that we forget to grieve. We forget verses 1 through 3 of Psalm 30, where the psalmist recounts their illness, whatever that may have been, and takes a moment to sit there with the reality of facing death. Each of us has experienced a death of some sort, or loss. Loss of job, home, love, family member, security, or peace of mind, and we are never prepared for the rug to be ripped right out from underneath us. We are never prepared for the diagnosis or the phone call in the middle of the night. Each of these things can feel as if we are facing our own death, and each of these things can pilot us into our own pit. Each of these things can plunge us into the darkness of night where weeping abides and day is far from us. 3 weeks ago, we met in this place while the news was unfolding about the horror in Orlando. And by the time I looked at the news that afternoon, headlines of Taylor Swift and her new boyfriend were everywhere. And I thought to myself, have all the families of the Orlando victims even been told? Have we become so desensitized to such acts of violence that we are perpetuating BuzzFeed articles about celebrities less than 24 hours after the largest mass shooting in history? Did we forget about Sandy Hook too quickly? Or Aurora, Columbine, the Charleston 9? On June 22nd, a week and a half ago, notorious civil rights activist John Lewis rallied together senators on the floor of the House and spoke sternly as he slammed his hand onto his podium and cried out for good trouble. "Let us make good trouble," John Lewis cried. He and his cohort on the floor begged us not to forget this time, not to move on so quickly to our mourning, as they all sat on the house floor for over 16 hours, not too far down the road. This week in an Istanbul airport, 42 innocent lives were claimed in another act of terrorism. Last Sunday, another murder was committed in the Robinwood neighborhood. We know where that is, don't we? By this time next week, perhaps another country will divide amongst itself amidst the language of terror and hate. Yet tomorrow we will eat hamburgers, clink glasses together, and watch fireworks with our friends and family as we celebrate our country's independence, right in the middle of what feels like a tornado of mourning. How can we celebrate in the wake of grief? Are we ready for God to turn our mourning into dancing, or do we need a few more days, or months, or sometimes years? Or can we simultaneously remember trial and tribulation and hold that tension while remembering God's faithfulness, even when we cannot see it for ourselves? Perhaps that is what the psalmist is trying to do as they call for everyone to join in the song. Perhaps the psalmist is offering an opportunity for those present to join in and share stories of grief and deliverance as an offering of hope to those gathered who may not quite be ready to take off their sackcloth. Theologian James Mays writes, "The presence of other worshipers shows how important the experience of grace, God's grace, is in the life of an individual for the community," saying essentially that it is paramount for us to share our stories with one another, to share our days and our nights, our weeping and our celebrating, so that even when we aren't quite ready to move forward, we can remember. We can remember the days when we said in our prosperity that I shall never be moved. And we can remember the days when we felt that God was hiding God's face from us. Brothers and sisters, as we continue to grieve tragedies such as Orlando and Istanbul, as we remember past instances of hate and violence such as the Charleston 9, as we remember our own losses, our own pits, and our own grief, and we look desperately into the darkness of what seems like a never-ending night, may we be reminded of the day. May we be reminded that there has never in the history of the world been a night without a day. May we be reminded of the Psalms, countless lines urging us to remember God's faithfulness in the pits of despair. May we remember the stories of those we love that have shared their joy with us. Let us rejoice together as we remember the times in our lives when we cried out to God to be our helper. And let us all join in the song of celebration that celebrates the day in which Jesus sat with his disciples and proclaimed that he would never leave them or forsake them, that he would never be apart from them, and that whenever a day came when they could not remember him, that they could eat, and they could celebrate with a feast. Today, as we join together around this table to remember and perhaps to grieve, let us bring all of our stories. Let us bring all of ourselves, our memories, and all that makes us who we are. And let us remember that this love that wins never lets our foes rejoice over us. This love that wins and brings us up from the pit. This love that wins and calls us and helps us to remember. This love that is promised just as every night has a day.